Hello, I'm Rahul Devdhar and wish you a very happy 2010. The first part of 2010 was dominated by China news, and a lot of commentators have weighed in, uh, triggered by James Channel's post on a possible China bust in 2010. I would like to add a few points, predominantly in three areas. A, is there a bubble in China? Second, will it burst in 2010 or even 2011? And third, a long-term perspective on uh, whether China can transform itself into a consumer economy and in a near future so as to pull the world out of recession through its consumption demand. Coming to the first, is there a bubble? There definitely seems to be a bubble. And I think a lot of commentators are giving an example that there is so much more to go, there's so much more demand, there is so much more work to be done, there is so much more infrastructure to be built, and that's why there is no bubble. I think that talk is bunk because at any point in the life cycle of a country or an economy, there is likely to be a bubble, and that has no bearing on whether it is in progress, it is in growth, it is how much more to go to reach the developed country status and all that, and that has no bearing at all to my mind whether there is a bubble or not. The point where there is a bubble or not is decided whether end user or the final buyer is able to afford the asset or a good or not. If he's not able to afford the asset, if he is stretching beyond conventional metrics to buy an asset, then there is definitely a sign of bubble. Having said that, no one really can say when the bubble will burst. So, in that aspect, I think James Chan is, by the mere fact that he has predicted the bust of a few bubbles, should gain an upper hand. But realistically speaking, all that the presence of bubble indicates is that there is a higher probability that there will be a bust in the near future. There is no likelihood, and even I've read his article, and he doesn't really say that there will be a bust on so and so date or something like that. But the tone is such that there is a heightened probability that there will be a bust, and I agree to it that there is a heightened probability that there will be a bust in coming few months or coming few years. And the key data point that he cites is the kind of flipping of real estate amongst the government officials, and how the final common man is ending up with holding the bag. That, to my mind, is a typical flag for potential bust of a bubble. Second is, interest rates are now entering an ascending cycle, so there will be some sort of a pressure exerted by interest rates and growing interest payments on the common man, and that is usually one of the triggers of busting at least the real estate bubbles. So coming to the third part where I would like to spend more time is, can China really transform itself into a consumer economy? And I don't think in even the next 5 years it is possible for China to transform itself into a consumer economy. And there are a few reasons for that. First of all, it is beneficial to be a consumer-led economy, particularly if you're, in income dispersion is quite wide, or you have very rich people and very poor people. Higher consumption typically or generally tends to imply a better degree of travel of money within the economic pyramid, or within the income pyramid, and it generally tends to go down the pyramid. So it means a higher velocity, and therefore it is desirable to have a consumption led economy, particularly so for someone like China. The second is markets, particularly require market infrastructure that is particularly required for a consumption based economy is very different. It requires choice, it requires a legal mechanism, redressal mechanism, it requires a trial and error mechanism where companies come in and try and adapt to the preferences of the local markets, and they fail, and then they create new products much more closely aligned with the market, and then they succeed. In this whole process of trial and error, the innovation process requires some amount of uh, some amount of institution building, which is not very clear, but it is a soft infrastructure kind of that is required. Uh, the kind of infrastructure is difficult to build, just by putting in money, because it requires a mindset change. So while on one side, just by changing the exchange rate paradigms, it is possible to create higher consumption by, let's say, for example, if there are a tremendous amount of rich people in China desiring Louis Vuitton bags, then just by change of exchange rates, a lot of more people can afford these new bags, and therefore, you will have a tremendous amount of sale going in for Louis Vuitton bags, or for example, Porsche or BMWs for that matter. Those will become available and easier to consume. This is the kind of consumption that the world wants of China, because a branded product with a well accepted brand typically is generally established in the Western world, can then use this brand equity to sort of pull itself out, and thereby creating jobs and prosperity. This is the kind of consumption they want, but China doesn't want this kind of consumption. China wants its inherent indigenous consumption, which will lead to income trickling down to down the pyramid. The third part is this consumption related infrastructure, a soft consumption, is very very parallel to democratic setup. So it's a multi choice. People are happy to choose, people want to choose, people want to express their opinions, and democracy is simple parallel between these principles. So it is a complement. Uh, it's complementary. Both are complementary. The kind of political structure China has is not really complementary with a market, consumption-driven market. It is very much aligned to a producer-driven market. I doubt if China has noted this or is going to act based on this, but all this tells me that it is not going to be really possible to pull out a consumption-led China in the very near future. So it will require an overall development which should take about 5 or more years to develop. So 2020 might see a China which is potent consumer, but not 2015, and we can't really pin our hopes on China for recovery in these 5 years. So that's it for now. I'll see you in some time. Thank you.